The cabin stood deep in the heart of Blackwood Forest, a lonely sentinel surrounded by ancient trees and a shroud of mist. For years it had been abandoned, a remnant of an era forgotten by time. The locals whispered about it, their voices hushed with fear and superstition. They called it the Devil's Lodge, a place where evil thrived and shadows danced even in the brightest daylight. No one dared to venture near, not even the bravest of hunters or the most reckless of teenagers. In the early spring of 1985, a group of hikers, drawn by curiosity and the thrill of the unknown, decided to explore Blackwood Forest. They were seasoned adventurers, each with a deep love for nature and a taste for the eerie tales that surrounded such places. They set out with confidence, their gear packed with precision, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. The forest greeted them with an unnatural silence, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Birds did not sing, and even the wind seemed to avoid the dense canopy above. As they trekked deeper, the trees grew closer together, their gnarled branches intertwining like skeletal fingers, blocking out the sun and casting the forest floor in perpetual twilight. The hikers soon stumbled upon the cabin. Its wooden structure was weathered and decrepit, the windows dark and vacant like hollow eyes. A sense of dread washed over them, but they pushed it aside, their curiosity stronger than their fear. They decided to make camp nearby, planning to investigate the cabin the following day. As night fell, the forest grew colder. The campers huddled around a small fire, its flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows. An oppressive silence enveloped them, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the rustle of leaves. Despite their bravado, an unspoken tension hung in the air, each of them feeling the weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. In the dead of night, one of the hikers, Emily, was awakened by a strange sound. It was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, carried on the wind. She sat up, straining her ears, but heard nothing more. Convinced it was just her imagination, she lay back down, but sleep eluded her. As she stared at the canvas of her tent, she noticed a shadow moving outside. Her breath caught in her throat, and she remained perfectly still, hoping it was just an animal. The shadow moved closer, its shape indistinct but undeniably human. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she watched, paralyzed with fear. The figure stopped outside her tent, and for a moment, all was silent. Then, the whispering began again, louder this time, and undeniably real. It was a language she did not understand, harsh and guttural, sending chills down her spine. Morning came, and Emily shared her experience with the group. They dismissed it as a bad dream, the product of an overactive imagination and the eerie atmosphere of the forest. But Emily knew what she had seen and heard, and a deep sense of foreboding settled over her. Determined to explore the cabin, the hikers made their way to its entrance. The door creaked open with a bone-chilling groan, revealing a dark interior that smelled of mold and decay. Dust motes danced in the weak shafts of sunlight that managed to penetrate the grime-covered windows. The air was thick with an ancient, oppressive energy that seemed to cling to their skin. Inside, the cabin was a relic of the past. Old furniture, covered in dust and cobwebs, lay scattered about. The walls were adorned with faded photographs and tattered curtains. In the corner stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface cracked and clouded. As they explored, they found strange symbols carved into the wooden beams, their meaning unknown but clearly malevolent. One of the hikers, Mark, felt a strange compulsion to approach the mirror. As he stood before it, he could see his reflection, distorted and twisted. His face appeared gaunt, his eyes hollow and lifeless. He reached out to touch the glass, and the moment his fingers made contact, a shock of cold shot through his body. He staggered back, gasping for breath, his heart racing. The others rushed to his side, but Mark insisted he was fine, though he could not shake the feeling of icy fingers gripping his heart. They decided to leave the cabin and continue their hike, but the forest had other plans. As they walked, they realized the paths they had taken before were no longer recognizable. The trees seemed to shift and move, leading them in circles. Panic set in as they struggled to find their way back to their campsite. Night fell once again, and the hikers were forced to make camp in an unfamiliar part of the forest. The oppressive silence returned, heavier than before. As they tried to sleep, the whispering began anew, louder and more insistent. The words were unintelligible, but their tone was one of malice and hatred. Shadows moved just beyond the firelight, their shapes contorting and twisting in ways that defied logic. Emily lay awake, her eyes fixed on the dark forest beyond the campfire. She could feel the presence of something watching, waiting. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. She jumped up, her heart pounding, and saw Mark standing at the edge of the clearing, his eyes wide with terror. Before anyone could react, he was pulled into the darkness, his screams abruptly silenced. Panic and chaos ensued as the remaining hikers searched for Mark, but he was nowhere to be found. They could feel the forest closing in around them, the trees pressing closer, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Exhausted and terrified, they decided to return to the cabin, hoping to find some semblance of safety. The cabin welcomed them back with its cold, dark embrace. They barricaded the door and huddled together, their fear palpable. The whispering voices grew louder, echoing through the cabin like a chorus of the damned. The mirror in the corner seemed to pulse with an unnatural light, drawing their eyes despite their attempts to look away. Emily couldn't resist the pull of the mirror. She stood before it, her reflection staring back at her with eyes that were not her own. The glass rippled like water, and she felt herself being drawn in, the cold seeping into her bones. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing she saw was her own face, twisted in agony, before darkness consumed her. The remaining hikers watched in horror as Emily disappeared into the mirror. They tried to break it, to shatter the glass and free her, but their efforts were in vain. The mirror remained intact, its surface smooth and unyielding. Desperation turned to madness as they realized they were trapped, their fates sealed by the malevolent forces that inhabited the cabin. One by one, they fell victim to the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, driving them to the brink of insanity. The forest closed in around the cabin, the trees standing like silent sentinels, watching as the evil within claimed its victims. By the time the last hiker succumbed, the cabin was silent once more, its dark secrets hidden from the world. Years passed, and the story of the Devil's Lodge faded into legend. The forest reclaimed the cabin, vines and moss covering its weathered walls. The whispers, however, never ceased. They lingered in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to venture too close, to become another chapter in the dark history of Blackwood Forest. And so, the cabin remains, a testament to the horrors that lie hidden in the heart of the forest. A place where evil dwells, and shadows dance, waiting for the unwary and the brave. A place where the past and present merge, and the line between reality and nightmare blurs. The Devil's Lodge, forever watching, forever waiting, in the depths of Blackwood Forest.